Okay, good morning. We're on Hemshech Tzadik Dal 5694, page 55. If you need the text, just follow along. At ayinbeis.com, you have the PDFs of all these pages. So we're up to chapter 17. So what have we learned? As I explained yesterday, the context, I'll just sum it up briefly, that we're learning about the process from the highest, innermost, core essential levels, what we call atzmus, whether it's atzmus hanefesh in the human being, or it's atzmus when you're talking about the essence of the divine, how that manifests in expressive forms that ultimately have a relationship with something, with another identity, another consciousness, if you wish. And though is the true interface, because is the way God manifests in a Metzias Nimtza, an existential state. But within we're talking about generally two levels of rotzen, of desire. One that's removed from the objective of the desire, it's just a determination that you want it, that's worthy of being wanted. And another is the active pursuit. Rotzen at sinner, that you're actually being channeled and drawn and pursuing. So it's a engaging experience with the objective desire, but it's still all rotzen, remember. It's still rotzen. And he explained the first level is called either rotzen hanelam, koyach rotzen. They also use the word machshava. Machshava kara, which is like a cool, detached type of thought about it. And the second level, he compared to the difference between seichel amidus, intellect and emotions, to an engaging experience where there's a spilus, where there's a anticipation, and there's a essentially it's in motion. It's an actual active rotzen pursuing the thing that has a relationship with. And he said, and so the higher level of rotzen, on one hand, it's removed from the objective desire because it's only a determination. It's only a heskim. One second. On the other hand, it's still a yerida, it's still a descent from the etzem itself. Because the etzem itself has not even come to a determination. Determination in heskim and hechlet is already a state. It's a state that's removed relatively compared to the active desire that's pursuing it. So he says, this rotzen is like a mamutza. The last line he says, in conclusion, all of this, at the end of it all, this rotzen is like a mamutza bein etzem nefesh lerotzen hagali, between the core soul and the desire and the revealed and active desire. So clearly, he's still speaking here in the mashal, or at least in the human level, because he's calling it etzem nefesh. Obviously, we can apply all this also to the two levels of rotzen above, but he didn't get there yet. So right now, that's what the summation here is. I might make one more point. He said that that based on the above, there's another hevdel ikri, a fundamental difference between the two. And as I explained, I believe that the addition he's adding here is okay, that regarding the nefesh, the first level of rotzen, the higher level, so the muhus of the nefesh is not yet being drawn to something. It's just determined. So it's like a determined state. And the second level, the actual nefesh is being drawn into engaging and relating to the objective desire. The objective desire. Okay. So now we'll move to chapter 17. Unless anyone wants to ask a question, we'll move on. And as I said, just to give you a little background here, this is citing and elaborating on Ayin Beis, volume 2, where we're learning, page 1147 through 1149. But the Frierdiker Rebbe, taking the cue from the Rebbe Rashab, who referred to earlier Maimorim, is actually quoting also Ayin Beis, chapter 64, 65, Soon he'll be referring to chapters 59 and 60. So he's basically bringing together two parts of Ayin Beis, what we're actually learning in volume 2, and number 2, the chapters earlier that the Rebbe Rashab referred to. So now, I also yesterday summed up the relationship to the whole discussion, why this is so important, because essentially it is our avodah that we can connect to the different levels, and each one has a quality that the other doesn't have. Some are more relatable to us, some are more relatable to the essence, to God. And basically that's how it works. The interface, that's how interfaces work. They're about connecting two things or two states of consciousness, two identities, two different realities. Like you said, one muhus, another muhus, that the Ratzon brings you from the muhus of this nefesh to relate to the muhus of something else, which is not just, in other words, it's not just a superficial relationship, it actually is a deep relationship. And yesterday I gave the example, marriage. The same thing as in any type of avodah, you can see, I describe 3 levels, etzem hanefesh, rotzen hanelam, and rotzen hagoli, but it can be explained in many different ways, but essentially it's 3 different ways of the relationship, 3 different dimensions of the relationship. Okay. Vihine. Let me just qualify. When I say relationship, remember, even when you don't have any understanding and you're completely bottled, it's also a relationship. But it's not a relationship so much on your terms and how you relate to it. It's more that you're so-called surrendering to it through a bittul. And we spoke that you need all levels, from the lower levels to the higher levels. So now he continues in chapter 17. Vihine, koyach harotzen, the power of desire, he's talking now in general, all levels of desire, hu mekeches makifim shebenefesh. They are from the transcendent faculties of the spirit, of the soul. He's going to explain what that means. But briefly, they're the localized pnimis dikakeches, which he's going to say now, and there's the ones that are not localized, they're all-encompassing. In that sense, it's a makif. There are generally two keches makifim, rotzen and tainug. Tainug is not really being addressed here, so it's not really relevant to our discussion, but just for the record. Ukanal, and as we learned earlier, the klolos hakeches mischalkum lebeis madreges keilalim. That the general faculties divide into 2 general categories, or I would say klolos hakeches, general, not just general, 2 encompassing faculties, keilalim. Not kololim, he says keilalim, which means they encompass other levels. So it's 2 general levels that encompass specific levels. Remember, in Ratzon, we spoke already 2 levels. You could even say more than 2, but at least 2. So you see that even though there's Ratzon, it's keilal, specific levels in each one too. Let me just see something here when he went to Ratzon. Give me a second. Yeah. I'm just looking back where he first talked about Ratzon the first time. Okay. So there's two levels. V'heim, what are the 2 categories of faculties? V'heim, they are pnimim u'makifim. The actual translation, pnimim means internal, inner. Makifim means above or around, or Alter Rebbe makes it clear it's not surrounds, it's not outside, it means it's removed from. So pnimi makif means something, technically it means surrounding it, pnimi means entering within. In the Kabbalistic language, we talked igulim yesher. An eagle is like a circle, like a makif, and a yesher, which means a line. Yesher is a straight line. Yesher is the kav, that enters internally. And that's a general rule about all our faculties, that there are the 2 levels, whether it's a koyach makif or a koyach pnimi. Where did he speak about Igul and V'yesher? I think that's where he may have said. Oh, it was an Ayin Beis. We didn't get to it here yet. Okay. The levels in Rotzen. Okay. Seichel hu pnimi. Seichel is a koyach pnimi. Now, if you want more details on this, you just have to go back to Ayin Beis in the first 40 chapters. First, after chapter 1, from chapter 2 till around chapter 45, he talks at length about koyach pnimi, but especially in the first chapters there. A koyach pnimi, like seichel, means a few things. I think if I recall, there's only 10 distinctions between a pnimi and a makif. But the most basic one is that the pnimi means it's localized. Like in the case of seichel, the seichel is the brain inside the rosh. It has a keli, the head. Within the skull, there's a brain. And the brain has the functionality of intelligence. So the keli would be the brain. The seichel would be the koyach pnimi that manifests within the brain. Take away the brain, and there's no seichel. Could be, yes, a conceptual seichel, but it's not going to be a faculty that's functioning. If you have only seichel and you don't have a physical brain, like I just said, it'll be that. If you have only a physical brain, you don't have the koyach, then it's also not. So it's basically and keli. That's a pnimi is defined by and a keli. Same thing with the other koyches. He's using seichel here. A makif, as he explains, there does not have. Where's Rotzen reside? Rotzen is everywhere. The Rotzen to do anything. It could be the Rotzen to use your mind. It could be the Rotzen to have an emotion. It could be the Rotzen to walk, to run, to use your fingers. I mean, there's many things that the Rotzen functions. So he says that Seichel Chabad, Chochma bin Adas, Hu Pnimi. And what's makif? I see he does mention here. The Einig v'Rotzen makif. Pleasure and desire, or pleasure and will, is makif. V'hainu. This means sha'seichel v'shari keiches pnimim, intelligence, and the other internal, or we call them immanent faculties. Immanent meaning present in a very direct way, which is also important here. The rotzen of something, or tainuk for something, is removed somewhat. Yes, you want it, but what do we relate to most is the activity itself. Like if someone says to you, okay, I want to go sit down now, let's learn together a chavrusa, let's sit together, we're going to learn something. So there's two things at work here. Your desire to do so, the rotzen, and the einug behind that. And then there's the actually sitting down and using your mind. So most of us don't really dissect the two. The rotzen is almost like the driving force. Not almost, it is. But the action that you're involved in is using your seichel. But when you think about it, you realize you have to have a desire to use your seichel. So if you really break the two down, the seichel we relate to much more, because that's what you're actively experiencing. The rotzen is somewhat more invisible, somewhat more above, somewhat like behind the scenes, pushing you to do so. But your active experience is a keiches pnimi. So a pnimi is also a conscious active experience where a makif remains somewhat removed, somewhat above. Even the rotzen that we spoke that has a relationship and is pursuing it, it's still not the final product. You pursue it and then you achieve your intended goal. But you need the keiches premium to achieve that goal. You can't just have a rotzen without keiches premium, or else it's like having desire and you don't have faculties to implement them, to actualize them. Okay. So you have pnimi and makif. Seichel v'shari keiches pnimi yesh lehem kelim protim. The seichel and the other immanent and internalized faculties, they have kelim protim. They have very specific containers or vessels or landing, a locality, if you wish. Be'evrei gufa adam, in the limbs and organs, in the components of the physical body. Like we said, seichel is in your head. Reish is the keli for the moyach, which is the keli for the seichel. The same thing, let's say vision, the eye is the keli, the koyach is the oir inside that keli. So they are basically faculties that have a kelim protim. By contrast now, the einig v'rotzen shehem akifim, pleasure and desire, or pleasure and will, which are transcendent, removed, Ein lehem kelim pratim. They don't have specific container. You can say, here is where they reside in the human structure. The ima yes. And even though the keach harotzen er makiv v'lei pnimi, so based on this, you could make the case, okay, so rotzen is removed and that's it. Nevertheless, he says, even though keich harotzen is a makiv and not a pnimi, means it's not localized, it doesn't have a particular container and vessel, but kol mokim, nevertheless, gam hu mischalik l'shnayim. It too, meaning the rotzen, the desire, divides into two. Ha'echad harotzen hanelam, a rotzen hanelam. The first is the concealed desire, oy koyach harotzen, or the power of desire, kanal shu rotzen kloli. Now I was giving another name we didn't hear till now. Like we spoke before, that's a rotzen kloli. What means a rotzen kloli? It's the general desire, determination, you want something. But he uses the word kloli now. V'abeis, the second level, hu harotzen shenyoni hatoya v'hamshacha la'adova shu reitzeh. This is the rava that it's inyan, what he called before Mahusam Metzias, is inclination, is being drawn to and pursuing the thing that he desires. And what is this called? V'nikra, it's called rotzen hagoli. It's called a revealed desire, uba b'tzir prati dafke. And it comes in a specific shape and form, because it's pursuing something specific. The rotzen to use your intelligence, the rotzen to build a home, the rotzen to marry, are different siyurim. They're all desire, but they're different siyurim. Now, the rotzen klali, what he just called klali, is a determination. I'm not sure why that he doesn't call that a tzir prati, but it could be because it means it's general determination. It doesn't say what type of home or what type of art the artist is going to create. So it could be that's why it calls it klali here, in the sense that it's not yet shaped in the specifics. Yes, it's a desire, determination that this and this thing is worthy to desire, but it's in the pursuit in the second level where it gets a tzir prati. Now the chiddush here, of course, is that it's even though it's a makif. Remember, pnimi that has a hierarchy and structure and levels, my kamashmal, that's obvious, because that's his whole definition. Seichel is a and a keli, it's a keli, and therefore there's more seichel, less seichel, there's levels of seichel. But in rotzen, you could say, I just want, I just desire. He says, no, even though rotzen is a makif, in the makif there are levels. This is leading up to, if you may remember in Ayin Beis, the next section, Ayin Beis, on page, the bottom of 1149, 1150, if you look, 1147, I'm sorry, 1148. Yeah. He started talking about, if you remember, how do levels emerge in makif? Makif seems to be removed, and that's it. The yesh shleimer there that he said because the makif travels through the pnimi. We haven't gotten there yet in Tzadik Daled, but you see, he's starting to now qualify that even though it's a makif, and you think it's removed from existence, or it's removed from, in a human being, it's removed from the desired goal, yet we see that the makif, the rotzen, is developing levels. And one level has its tzir prati, the lower level. Ad shalapomim, to the point that at times, hine mepnei hadigduk, b'milei kol prati harotzen, due to the precision or the focus in fulfilling all the details of this desire, l'chol prati prati sifeim, to all the detail and details, sifeim means like all its subcategories. So in other words, once you have a determination, let's just use an example. You determine you want a home. That's the first level. Now you've come to the point where you're actually pursuing it. So you're pursuing it. Now the question is, what kind of home do you want? So you start saying, I want a home with 10,000 square feet. I want to have 20 bedrooms. I know I'm thinking big here, but it doesn't matter what it is. These details, that details. The rotzen is now, we're not talking about building it yet. We're talking about defining what you want. So now there's a bunch of details. So he says, lepomim, at times, this rotzen that we're talking, that's a makif, that has now got into a state of pursuit and drawn to what it desires at times, due to the precision or the focus on the details, that every aspect and every subcategory, sif is like in Shulchan Aruch, you say a siman and a sif. A siman is a whole section. A sif is a section within this, like a subsection. That at times it's actually called ritzenis pratim, specific desires. So now he's adding not just a rotzen, it's not just not a rotzen kloli, like this determination. It's not just pursuing it, and there are which makes it tzir prati, because you have to define what you're pursuing, the details. He's saying sometimes it's actually called ritzenis pratim, specific desires. Well, you see what he's doing here, just to give you the context, he's trying to create and explain to us the getting closer and closer the interface of the relationship between rotzen and the product. By saying that the rotzen has specifics, you're now creating in the makif, even on the terms of the bala rotzen, the one who desires, he's also getting involved in details. It's still not the actualization. We're not talking about building it yet, the home or the art. But in the rotzen, in the makif, you're already getting specific detailed imagery, so to speak, envisioning the specifics to the point that you can call it at times ritzenis pratim. V'hainu sheyesh b'zeh davar v'yifuche, and this means that this rotzen has in it essentially a paradox. It has two opposites at work: a davar and ifuche. That usually means that is translated as a thing, and v'yifuche and something opposite. So like it has a paradox. Mitzad echad, from one side, hadi'im le nishlam harotzen, if the rotzen will not be fulfilled or realized, page 56. Next page. L'chol prati Esav, with all its details and the details. Hadi'ein rotzen shalom, it's not a complete desire. If, for example, going back to the example of the home, you want a home with specifics, and at the end of the day, instead of 20 rooms, you get 10 rooms, or some other thing that was not fulfilled. So he says it's ein rotzen shalom. That means the rotzen is not complete unless you fulfill all the details of its desire. Pirush segam zeh shenishlam ein rotzen shalom. It means even the part that was completed, you completed half a house or half of what you desired in the house. So he says not just what's missing is missing, even the part that has been finished, ein rotzen shalom. It's not a complete desire, because that's what his entire desire was not fulfilled. The inyan harotzen was kishenishlam kuloi im kol prati Esav. So for the contractor, will tell you, I built you half a house. Say, very nice, but my whole desire, it's not like you fulfilled my desire and then there's some desires you didn't fulfill. The whole project is not complete. My whole rotzen is not complete. So all of it is basically compromised. So in other words, the details are not optional. They're necessary for the rotzen to be complete. Every detail down to the last detail has to be fulfilled and realized. That's on one side. Remember, davar v'yifuche, paradox. Umitzad hasheni, and from the other side, on the other hand, you can say, on one hand, on the other hand, hine yesh hefresh bein inyonim ha'ikrim sheberotzen. There's a difference between the primary elements within the desire, rotzen ahu, within that desire, la'inyonim shem rak sifim bolvad, to the details or this aspects that are just subcategories. I mean, going back to the example, even though it's true that if you don't fulfill every detail of the desire, it's not complete. On the other hand, you can't say it's the same thing. People do move into a home, even let's say the basement wasn't finished, or one of the rooms was not finished. However, you can't move into the home if you don't have the fundamentals, which means the structure and the key rooms. So he's saying that on one hand, the rotzen needs for it to be complete, all the details have to be there, but that doesn't mean there isn't a distinction between a primary aspect of it and a specific detail. That's what he's saying of the two sides of the coin here. V'hainu, this means the ima yes shebachol hamadreges, that even though on all the levels, heina ikrim, both the primary elements, the heina snifim, and both the subcategories. Snif is often also a subsidiary, but here it doesn't mean subsidiary. Like it means here a specific subcategory, basically. I mean, v'hanofim, and now he gives another name, and branches. So if you think of a tree, there's the tree trunk and the main branches, and then it branches off into details. So he says, so even though in all the levels, both the primary elements and the snifim v'hanofim, the snifim would be the subcategories and the branches, hu rotzen, they're all rotzen, they're all part of that one desire. Ve'ein be'em shini be'etzem teva mitzius madregoson, and there's no difference in the core nature, the core personality of their levels, because in the general in the desire for the whole picture, he wants every specific detail. So in other words, on one hand, there is a certain element that equalizes them all, the primary things and the details. Makom mokim harihim chalukim bezeh. Nevertheless, they're different and distinguished in this. The dvarim Elohim ikrim, these things are primary. The Elohim rak snifim labad, and these are only snifim, are only subcategories. So, for example, if you said, okay, in the house I want to have a guest room, and I wanted that guest room, I want to have 3 closets, and only 2 of them were done. So on one hand, the 3 is all part of the picture. That's my home. This is my rotzen is to have 3 closets in there. On the other hand, if someone says, are they actually equally valuable? No, from the rotzen point of view, there's a certain equality because that was my whole picture. That's the picture. From the point of view of, let's call it functionality, you could say, you know what? We could manage with 2 closets and maybe build it later. But if you don't build the guest room altogether, then you're missing something. The whole room is not built. So in other words, there's 2 aspects to it. I would almost say, to give another example, because I think what he's trying to explain is that the rotzen, on one hand, it's makif, on the other hand, it relates to pnimi. And he's trying to balance the very thin line of where does it move from detail to the general rotzen. But the fact of the matter is, we know, and I don't know if he's going to say it, I think he will. And I remember in Ayin Beis, he said that when a person, let's say a king, a rebbe, wants something, even a small detail that may not be significant to you, for him, it's just as important as the whole thing. Like when the Eibishter created the world, you could say one blade of grass you could say, who cares? It's negligible. There are billions of others. No, but from the point of view of the etzem, every detail is necessary. How do we know? It's like someone saying one musical note. No, so it'll be one musical note missing in a big symphony. Or an artist paints a painting with thousands of elements and one color is off or one detail is missing. So from a point of view of actually measuring, yes, you could say if the whole foundation of the piece of art is missing, the whole thing isn't there. Where a detail, you could always add it later. But from the point of view of the artist's vision, every detail matters. So it just really comes down to 2 perspectives on it. If you're talking about the vision of the artist or the vision of the Baal HaRotzen, then every detail matters. If you're talking about functionality, okay, obviously some things are like, there are beams in the house that are foundational beams that without it, the whole house can't stand, and there are beams that are optional. So it really comes down to whether you're talking about the function or you're talking about the Rotzen itself in explaining the distinction. But the fact is both are true. That's what he's saying here. Maybe he's going to explain more. Let's see what he says. I'll give one more example before we read on. There's the Mishnah that says, Le'elam al tehe shekel odam b'mitzvahs, kala kibechamura, havezoyer kikala kibechamura. A person shouldn't measure mitzvahs And they should be zoyer, they should be careful with a so-called lenient mitzvah as you are with a more severe or more fundamental mitzvah. So the question is immediately asked, if you're saying there's no difference, you shouldn't make a difference, so why do we tell this one, why do we call this mitzvah kala and this one mitzvah chamura? There's no difference. The answer is both are true. There is a difference. You shouldn't be distinguishing because they're both God's will. So whether it's a detail or something that seems to be a lighter mitzvah, doesn't have such a big einish, meaning it's not so fundamental. Like, for example, the Yud Gimel Ikrim are fundamental to Jewish faith. Not all the mitzvahs, the whole building falls if you don't believe. A person, for example, God forbid, doesn't keep Shabbos, the whole building of Yiddishkeit doesn't fall. If someone doesn't accept that there's a God and Torah is nitzchis, the whole building is compromised. But from the point of view of your behavior and the point of view of Ratzon Hashem, they're all Ratzon Hashem. So it comes down to, in a way, beside the etzem, they're all equal. Beside Giluyim, there's a difference. This one is a more vital mitzvah. Rabbi Akiva says, this is a fundamental principle in Torah. But we just said Kalik Chamura. Why are we calling something a Klal Gadol? Because there are things that are more fundamental. No one's denying that. When we do it, however, the Ratzon Hashem in Avis Yisrael, the Ratzon Hashem of not having a crumb of chametz on Pesach is equal from the Ratzon Hashem aspect. But then there's also a distinction how God how it manifests in Giluyim and in their fundamental nature. So that's why we say mitzvahs like mitzvahs adzog deilitz dokesh shavel shkula lekola mitzvahs. You don't say this on all mitzvahs. Certain mitzvahs, in a way, have that type of power, like all mitzvahs. So there is a distinction, but from the point of view of God's Ratzon, and the point of view of our Avodah, there's an element where this is God's Ratzon. What difference does it make if it's a small thing or it's a big thing? So both are true. So he says like this: B'kol mokim harim chilukim behem dvarim elam ikim ve'elhem snifim levad. The difference is between one and the other. B'mayloson be'elyon v'tachten. The difference between the snif, the ikrim, the primary things, and their subsidiary or the secondary or the branches, the difference is, that's a good example also. You take a tree. You cut off a branch from a tree, the tree is not going to die. You cut off the trunk or you cut off the main artery. That's a whole other story. Same thing in a human body. We learned, if you remember, chai be'etzem. Life force is in the head to the toenail. But that doesn't mean that there aren't primary organs and secondary ones. There are, what do we call them, vital organs. That if, God forbid, certain organs are compromised, the whole body is going to go. Other organs are not that way. You can have a compromised finger or an injury, and it's not necessarily life-threatening. So how do you explain that? That's the difference. If you're talking about the etzem achayis, the body is alive from head to toe equally. If you're talking about specifics, of course there's a hierarchy. That's what he's saying now. The difference between the primary elements in the Ratzon, going back to the desire, and the so-called secondary, or not primary, is a qualitative is a difference between Elyon and Tachten, higher and lower, canal, like we discussed earlier. The be'efun amidosam shalaheskim va'arotzim be'evri hanefesh. Remember, we spoke earlier that actually the conceptual location of the two levels of Ratzon, he said one on page 54. He spoke about that just like the physical limbs and organs of the body have locations, he said also the keiches hanefesh have that. And he said the Ratzon HaGolei is in a level that is closer to the poil, to the final product, and relates to it. And the Ratzon HaNelam or Heskim is more removed from it. So those are two stages. Obviously not physical space, but in conceptual and spiritual space, they're two different locations. So he's saying that right now the same. That the difference in Elyon and the difference between the primary elements of the desire and the non-primary, he says, is in a milo mata. He means here qualitative milo mata. not quantitative, not physical. Ukanal de be'efen amidosam on page 54.
Can I ask something we just said a few minutes ago? I'm not sure if it's on the subject. You mentioned about the different types of mitzvahs and averis, and in a way, they're all equal, but not in all areas necessarily. And we're talking here about an interface. So is there an avera that would be, let's say, not as chomor, not a chiv koros, not as chomor as far as an einish is concerned, but on the other hand, it could be pagea in the person more than something which is avera which is more chomor?
Of course. Yeah. The answer is yes. Yeah. Okay. Ukanal the be'efen amidosam shalaheskim v'harotzen be'evri hanefesh, in the manner, the way, the location, basically where they're placed, of the heskim v'harotzen, which is the determination, level 1, and harotzen meaning the actual active pursuit or drawn to the object. Be'evri hanefesh, in the faculties of the soul, you can say, or the spiritual limbs. Hari harotzen, rotzen meaning, he means here the active rotzen. Hu boker el ha'pu'ula, is a source to the action, the pu'ula, the active function that the rotzen desires. Aide kiruve el ha'peil, by getting closer and relating more to that desired objective. V'heskim hu b'havdola ma'hapeil, and the heskim, the determination, the rotzen anelam, what he called earlier, is b'havdola, is removed from the function, the actual function, the actual pu'ula, the action that will bring the desired rotzen into actualization. The eina begeder shayches ala pu'ula, and it's not in the realm of a relationship with this pu'ula, with this action, because it's not pursuing it. It's just a determination from above, removed. So we see from this that there are two states. So he says the same thing is in the rotzen itself, that the rotzen has pratim, and some of them are primary, some are not primary. And that would be the difference. The difference between the primary and not primary is like the difference between in the rotzen itself, the rotzen gully itself, you also have so-called localities. Things that are more primary, things that are less primary. So he's comparing it, just as he spoke in general, the two levels of rotzen are two different states in relation to the desired objective. In the rotzen gully itself, there's a difference between details that are primary and details that are not primary. That's what he established now. And this, he's now going back. This is taking us back now to page 1147 in Ayin Beis. If you have your Ayin Beis, I can refer to you what line we're now going to go back to. After this longer discussion on Rotzen, the Rebbe, Frierdiker Rebbe, now is going back to the language of Ayin Beis at the bottom of page 1147.
You're talking about Rotzen is makif because there is no keli proti. But lemaisa, how is the body getting it? It's going through a keli proti, through the seichel. Otherwise, there's no connection between the Rotzen to all the protim of the body.
So first of all, you just answered your question. Even if the Rotzen travels through the seichel and through the nervous system, but it's not the seichel. So it's just the way it travels to the other parts of the body. But bottom line is, Chassidus says the Rotzen is really everywhere. So the question, how it travels, that's just a matter of transportation. But it's not, Rotzen and Seichel are not the same. Rotzen, you need Rotzen to have Seichel. So you could say the desire of a person, let's say to walk. So obviously you need the mind to send a signal to the legs to walk. But you need a desire first. So what's the contradiction? Rotzen is a makif, and it uses different faculties to get done what it's the captain of the ship. The captain is everywhere. He controls the whole ship, wherever he's sitting. How he sends the orders and through whom is already details. It's not relevant to the fact that he is the authoritative controlling force.
Thank you.
That's why you have a situation where the Ratzon can actually overpower the Seichel. The Seichel may say, this is not an intelligent thing to do, and the Ratzon says, do it anyway. This is what I want. People do this all the time. This is when the Nefesh Habamis is in the Ratzon is following the Nefesh Habamis. Your Seichel is telling you this is not a healthy thing to do. And the Ratzon says, no, do it. Or it could be fakert in a good way. Bottom line is Ratzon is yeah. Okay, to go back here, I'm looking at Ayin Beis right now, the bottom of page 1147. So remember, the flow here was this whole discussion about Ratzon all began to explain Oyer and the two levels of Ayin in the Oyer. Remember. So this in Tzadik Dal began on page 51. So now he's going back here, like he says, at the bottom of page 1147 in Ayin Beis, he says, yeah. Friedrich Rebbe explains these lines. I'm reading 5 lines, 6 lines from the bottom of page 1147 in Ayin Beis, volume 2. He says, Ratzon is er makif, sheyesh b'zeh Ratzon kloli v'retzenis pratim. ואם יהיה זה בכל המדרגות ובבחינת רצון ואם זה שינוי בעצם המדרגות, בכל מקום בבחינת מיעוט במעלוסן. Okay, basically these few lines in the bottom 1147 is really, if Friedrich Rebbe elaborated, I would say, over 5.5 pages was coming to explain the 5 lines of his father, the Rebbe Rashab's, bottom of page 1147. So if you really want to put it in context, that's what we just learned. And now he's bringing it back. He basically explained how Ratzon, a Makif, has levels in it. And now he's going to apply this to Lamaila, how it's Lamaila. That's now he's going back to the lines, second line from the bottom in Ayin Beis is now going to continue here in Tzadik Dal. You're following what I'm saying? Well, I hope you are. Okay, so he says the following now. And the example of this above, meaning in the lakus, in ruchni, in godliness. The gamba eir haseviv, that also in the eir haseviv, in the transcendent energy, not mamala, seviv, yesh gam ken chilukei dargis. There's also different levels. The betchilas hamshacha hu b'chinas er klali. The beginning of the transmission, it's in the state of a general er klali, without specifics. Like he said before, Ratzon klali. Now he's going to er klali. U'kumeshanimshach u'mispashet yeser. And the way it transmits and extends or expands further, nasa b'chinas ratzon prati. It becomes a specific desire, from kloli to prati. And now all this, if you remember Ayin Beis, you'll remember all these lines. What is the line here? It says v'tam hadovar. And what is this? What is the reason for this? Remember, in the beginning, the whole process, because it's oyer and not etzem, oyer is subject to gradation. It's subject to diminishment. A higher level of oyer, a lower level, like oyer havuka, like the light of a torch. When you're closer, it's more powerful and warmer, brighter. When you move away, it's more dim, it gets dimmer. So oyer is subject, and this whole discussion of Ratzon was within this discussion of oyer. She's now going to say, what's the reason? How does Eira Seviv suddenly get levels, when it's fundamentally a detached and removed entity. So you could say, God said so. God commanded that even though you're Seviv Kol Almin and you're an equalizer, nevertheless, I want you to relate now to some level. You should have levels in it. But as we constantly emphasize here, as much as possible, Hashem wanted it to be with Seichel, not Exeris HaKosov, not a decree from heaven that said suddenly a Seviv, which is removed from existence, should suddenly have levels in it. Mamala Kol Almin, its whole purpose is levels. It creates the hierarchy of existence. You must have a Ir Hakav that has Maila, Mata, a hierarchy, higher, lower, in more intense, less intense. That's the only way to create structure. In the words of the Alter Rebbe in Tanya Perek Lamed Vav, chapter 36, well, it's a Tachtenim. What does Tachtenim? Did it Tachtenim mean? Tachtenim in space? He says no. In Miut Erein Seif Baruch Hu. Is the lowest and the most diminished state of divine energy. You can't have a structure of Seder Shtalshelus, which by definition means Seder Shtalshelus, means an order, a cosmic order. That means hierarchy. Existence and hierarchy and structure are one and the same. That's Mamala Kalam. What about Seviv Kalam? So that as much as you can explain it, we're explaining it here. And that's why all this elaboration. So he's going to say, what's the reason for this? For these levels within Seviv Kalalman? In other words, you're already beginning to sense some structure, even in the desire, even in Ratzon, even in the Oyer, that starts as Eir Klali and is moving to Eir Prati. Says that the reason for this is, and this is exact language from Ayin Beis. The Eira Seviv Bo B'Chiluk Medregas, the reason for it coming into different levels, Hu Lefi Sham Shachu Derech Ha'er Pnimi. Because it transmits, the Eir Makif, the Seviv transmits through Eir Pnimi. Remember I said before, you asked me the question, how does Ratzon get to the rest of the body? It doesn't just bypass and jump over the other faculties. It works through the faculties. Basically, the Ratzon is like the master, the captain of the ship, the king. It tells the Seichel, this is what I want. The Seichel transmits that message to the part of the body that needs to do what the Ratzon wants. That's the active process. The truth is, so in other words, like I mentioned a number of times, the chief of staff, all his job is to tell us what the master wants, what the king wants. And then whatever has to happen, happens. Now, in Chassidus, the truth is, what I just said, Chassidus says sometimes, I don't know if you ever learned this, that the reason that when you want something, it happens automatically in the body and doesn't take any time is because there's Ratzon everywhere. You ever learned this? In Derech Mitzvah, a lot of places we hear that. That since, let's say you want the desire to twitch your toe, how fast will your toe twitch? Immediately. So Chassidus says that's a proof that Ratzon is there, because why? It would take time to travel till your toe. Now, of course, anyone today knows a little science or medicine or biology will say, 1 second here, physiology, 1 second. We have nerves everywhere. The mind is the central nervous system, and it instructs and immediately instructs. But even that does it take time or not? Maybe it's so fast we don't notice. If the body, let's say, was 100 miles long, maybe you would notice it. Like the speed of sound is slower than the speed of light. You can only tell that from a distance, when there's thunder and lightning, for example. But when you see me speak right now, even though sound travels slower than sight, but it's so close, or through technology, that it's immediate. But the fact, maybe it does take time. So this is a question that people who've learned Chassidus have been asking over the years. I can tell you my take on it, but regardless, he doesn't say this explicitly here, but it's just the point is that the Makiv does work through the Pnimi. So there's nothing wrong with saying, even though Chassidus says the Ratzon is everywhere, what Chassidus is saying, it's not like you open up the toe, you're going to find desire. Just like if you open up the brain, you're not going to find desire. But Ratzon is a koyach that's working from behind the scenes. It's a makif in the sense, it doesn't reside anywhere particularly. The nefesh has a desire, is drawn to something. And it's not a contradiction to say that it activates, the seichel is the communicator, and it is instantaneous because the nerves are everywhere and it doesn't need to travel, the nerve and the toe, is connected immediately to the other nerves that right away connect directly to the brain. And whether it takes time or not, I would say based on Chassidus, it doesn't take time. You could say it means literally it doesn't take time, or it's so fast that it doesn't make a difference because it's so quick. Anyway, I just throwing that in a little into the picture here. The point being here that Makif works through Pnimi. That was in Ayin Beis he called it a Yesh Lemer, but very often the Frierdiker Rebbe takes a Yesh Lemer, which means you can say from his father and makes it a Vadai. So he doesn't even say Yesh Lemer here. He just says as a fact that the Eira Seviv, why does it have levels? Because its transmission goes through the imminent energy. So it's not just a makif here and imminent energy here, like two tracks. One track travels through the other track. And that's what causes Seviv to assume levels. Now, of course, this just makes richer the whole interface and also richer the whole experience, the whole integration of it. It's not like different forces at work. Everything's working with each other. Remember, we learned Hiskalos, interconnectivity, that the human being is from is Elam HaTikun. What were the words he used before? Yeah. Yeah, that there's an interconnectivity also between Seviv and Mamala, or Makif and Pnimi. Okay. So we're now back to the lines from the bottom of page 1147 and top of 1148 in Ayin Beis, but with the whole elaboration that came before. I think what we'll do is stop here.
Could you make it a little more clear that the oil makif has to go through the oil pnimi, but it's still makif because it's obgit rogum? Where is here the ACS that after it's mislabish and oil pnimi, it's still a makif?
Well, we're middle of it. He's going to explain it. We already learned it in Ayin Beis. He explained it, and we discussed it in detail. And we're going to learn it here as we continue on. So there's no need to. We're going to learn it inside. We're going to talk about this. Just because God wants to have the world doesn't mean the highest levels of godliness become the world, right? Just because it's working through it doesn't mean it becomes it. So we'll talk about this more. I'll talk about it in the next few classes as we continue learning.
Sure.
Okay, so we stop.